Hey there, welcome back to That 70s Card Show. I am your host, John Keating, and I thank you for joining me as I take a look back at the cards and the culture of the very colorful 1970s. We'll revisit a more simple time in our hobby by taking a deep dive into the sets and the stats with a generous amount of dad facts sprinkled in. That 70s Card Show is currently sponsored by nobody. If you have a comment or suggestion, I urge you to drop me a line at that70scardShow at gmail.com, that70scardShow on YouTube, or 70s Card on Twitter. So this is episode 35, and we are turning back the clock on the year 2021. Seems to be a thing to do in the content creation world, of which I am obviously a neophyte, a newbie, whatever you want to call me. I started publishing my podcast May 31st of this year with episode 1, which was referred to and still referred to as the pilot episode. So I guess I should explain a little bit about myself. I've kind of tried to drop my story in along the way as we go here. There are a few episodes that get into a more detailed aspect of my collecting endeavors. Started collecting in 74, 73, 74 probably. First recollection of cards, again, is I think 1973, the Wacky Packages incident in Philadelphia with my brother. Remember my mom throwing away my brother's cards once we moved out of the city. Big cardboard box on the front porch. I think it's, in my mind, it's the size of a refrigerator box, but it was probably closer to a large shoebox. So I started anew in 74 or 75 with my own collection, and I still have most of those cards that I've picked up along the way. Got rid of some doubles, obviously, and sold a whopper of a card probably about 10, 15 years ago for reasons that I can't explain at this point. But that was the 53 Satchel Paige tops. Dumb. But anyway, along the way, my collection has survived, obviously, my childhood. It survived my dedication to heavy metal in the 80s. It survived girls, and then women, and then 10 years on a tour bus doing rock and roll tours, many countless moves across country and back. So I've had my collection that entire time. Ventured into in the late 90s into the slab game. I guess because in 94, the strike kind of turned me off to baseball, became more of a football fan at that point. Again, it's the same argument we have now with millionaires arguing with billionaires. But anyway, that's we won't dredge that up again because we seem to be living that. So I turned my attention more towards football as a fan in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. But I was also accumulating a lot of slabs along that way. eBay in the late 90s was pretty happening. So bought a bunch of slabs, bought a bunch of vintage cards, late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. So I was lucky enough to get a lot of really nice cards at what the time at the time was very expensive. But anyway, enough about that, right? So the point, and I'm rambling here, but the point was that the only thing that seemed to stop my collecting was the addition of our second child here in the early 2000s. Stopped playing golf, stopped collecting cards. Cards sat saran wrapped and bubble wrapped in the basement storage area for years, probably at least 2 decades. My oldest son kind of got me into it in early 2021. Again, he started coming home with cards and slabs and packs. So I jumped back in heavy with him in the beginning of 2021, ripped out my cards, unwrapped them. My slabs have always I've looked at my slabs probably once or twice a year inside of my safe, but really got heavy, hardcore back into collecting cards, and not of the credit card variety as the previous 20 years I had. So Yeah, that turns me into why did I do a podcast? Great question. I'm a stream of conscience kind of guy. I like to state my opinions. I like to get things off my chest. Uh, Fortunately for me, the hobby had not changed so much that I was really, really um, lost in the woods. My cards were my cards. They hadn't changed. My knowledge from the 70s, 80s, and 90s had not changed. So, of course, the game had changed. The players had changed, but so be it. I was able to adapt and jump back in pretty quickly. I tried to dabble in the newer stuff, and I did for a while, but just not my cup of tea. As baseball in the 2000s, the 21st century, doesn't appeal to me like it did back in the 70s and the 80s. Still an NFL fan to some extent. Obviously, I've picked up European soccer along the way as well. So don't really know the players that much, and by players I mean the owners, the management, and coaches, managers, and players, true players of today. So cardboard's cardboard. Still had plenty of stuff to get back to in my collection. 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, beyond. So anyway, again, I ramble, right? So why a podcast? I really started enjoying and listening to a lot of podcasts. I go to the gym a lot. I travel a lot for work. So podcasts really, really fill a great, um, I guess, quench a thirst for knowledge for me. I hate listening to commercial radio anymore, even satellite radio. Too much talking, not enough playing. I have everything I need on my iPhone or computer. I can listen to podcasts. I can listen to music. So podcasts fell right in the line there. Again, a lot of time at the gym. So kind of got into, speaking of gym, Dr. James Beckett's Sports Card Insights, and I listened to probably one of them in sometime in the spring, and then went back and started at back at one again. And a lot of the stuff I knew, it was very refreshing to hear his podcast, and it still is to this day. It's my first listen. Drops, as the kids say these days, at 7 a.m. on the East Coast. So I appreciate that, Dr. Jim. That's about when I start to hit the gym. Gymnasium, if you're somebody who grew up in the 70s. So I listened to that, 15 minutes, quick, down and dirty. I could listen to him talk for hours every day, but that's that. So another guy I listened to is Matt Salmon with Wax Ecstatic. And I don't know what has happened to Matt's programming in recent months. I know he had he moved, he changed jobs, all that stuff. So he probably doesn't have time to put into the podcast that he once did. And his podcast is was a well choreographed and informational podcast about stuff that he grew up with back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and sets and stuff. And he goes back further than that as well. But great listen to, and it's long form, which is why I bring that up. So you have Dr. Jim at 15 minutes, and you had Matt who would clock in at over an hour, and I appreciate that. There's people in their cars that listen to, people in their gym, airplanes, trains, all that stuff. So I don't mind the long form, and of course, boy, I can spin a yarn myself. I think my longest podcast was almost an hour and a half, and that was with Rich Klein. But we probably could have spoken for days, if not many more hours. So along the way, I started listening to other podcasts and about the collectibles, modern day collectibles, and our hobby. And while it was fun at first, I kind of migrated away from a lot of them because of the essentially the day trading aspect. It's kind of a turnoff for me I pick this up, it's worth $700. I rip this, it's worth $500. So it's not my style. It's a lot of respect to those that do that, but it's not my style. I just don't have the bandwidth to stay on top of things the way they do. And I am as Dr. Jim likes to call it, a long tail guy, but I'm a collector foremost. So I don't look at everything as what it's worth. I look at it as more, did I get a good deal on it? Because it's not going to it's not a revolving door in my collection. It's essentially a one-way door, and it's like my cards check in, but they don't check out for the most part. So anyway, I weeded some of those podcasts out. There's a lot of content there. Obviously, I still enjoy many podcasts. And there's some that I listen to that touch on the modern aspect that I just enjoy the personalities. Like Card Talk is one of those. Those guys talk a lot about, they talk about a lot about modern players and stuff like that, and not much of a vintage bent. But I do enjoy listening to the personalities involved and the back and forth between the host. Other ones have a much larger audience than I would ever hope for. Just not my thing, and I do appreciate what they do, because a lot of work goes into it. A lot of it's polished and professional, and they obviously have a lot more time and energy than I do. I do travel a lot for work, not so much in the past 18 months, but really started picking up in the last 6 months. I'm in the live event industry, so been on the road. I've done this podcast from Chicago, New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and some other places. So that's not always easy either, but it's fun with the way technology is. It kind of helps pass the time. I don't spend time in bars. I'm not a foodie. I don't smoke, don't drink, don't do drugs. So this is, I guess, my biggest vice, other than my actual outside of what my responsibilities with my family and spending time with them, quality time. This kind of helps pass the time on the road. So along those lines, I've also in the past 6 months decided to get my college degree. So been juggling all that as well. One assignment that I have not finished that I was supposed to from the very get-go was an assignment about your hobby. What's your hobby? And it's worth 1 college credit, but I haven't delved into that yet. I know it sounds odd considering I do a podcast every week that's simulcast on YouTube as well, but for some odd reason, I've not finished that assignment. Maybe that'll be my New Year's resolution to get that 1 credit. But anyway, I decided to go back and get my college degree, not out of any kind of career incentive, but I took my last class I took this year was a public speaking class, and the final assignment was pick a topic that you want to persuade, or a persuasive argument for an audience. Now, public speaking, I'm a shy guy. I'm a loner as well, as I like to say, but I've got this little act that I do where I can speak publicly. I deal with a lot of clients. I've been on stage in front of several hundred people to speak about certain things. I've taught classes in my field. And funnily enough, in my public speaking class, I had to give this persuasive argument assignment the week I was pitching a client on a multi-million-dollar deal. So, but I chose the topic of accountability. And the reason I went back to college was to be accountable to my 2 children, who I essentially pushed, pulled, prodded through elementary school, middle school, then high school. Both my sons are very bright, and who am I to not probably, but for sure the least bright out of the 3 men in the family. My 2 sons are brighter than I am. Who am I to implore to them the need for a college education if I don't do it myself? So accountability was my topic of my public speaking final. And so that's why I went back to school to get a degree. I'm 53 years old, and look at me in college. So that's another thing there is, coming out of my shell a little bit more. It used to be an act to cope with business situations, and now I enjoy actually getting behind the mic, putting my headphones on, and chatting about our hobby. So on top of all that, I was juggling all that, and I will continue to juggle all that as we go through into 2022, about halfway towards my associate's degree right now after 6 months. So good for me. And I know it hasn't, I haven't sounded any more educated now than when I started 6 months ago, or I guess it would be 7 months now. But we can still try. And part of the aspect of this podcast is education. Um, I've collected these cards for a long time in the 70s. And why did I choose the 70s? Well, the 70s are kind of, they're not the sexiest decade for collectors. One reason is not a lot of banging rookie cards in the 70s, and it was before the huge change in 1981, and it was the post Mickey Mantle era for trading cards. And Mickey Mantle obviously is the one who you can point to. You want to talk about Michael Jordan with sneakers? Mickey Mantle was that with baseball cards for sure. The perfect guy in the perfect place at the perfect time. So the 70s may not be the sexiest decade in our collecting world, but it's fairly affordable, okay, which is, I think, a beneficial thing for what most of us consider vintage cards. The late vintage era is the 80s. I'm sorry, the late vintage era is the 70s, and still kind of affordable. And I mentioned that in my podcast. Typically we'll go over, when I do the sets, I will go over the various prices that are listed in the Beckett OPG. And I don't do that out of any, we're not keeping score here, but it's kind of, for the most part, it implores the fact that, or it accentuates the fact that this decade is still very collectible and very affordable for anybody that wants to go back and pick up some of that stuff. I love the 70s. I was a product of the 70s. We started out with a lot of polyester. We finished with a lot of polyester in our personal lives, corduroys, all that fun stuff. And the cards were all right. The revolution was coming, obviously. Tops phoned it in. For the most part, it seems like they may have phoned it in the late part of the 70s, but there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of inserts in the early 70s, the cereal sets and the Twinkies and Hostess stuff in the mid to late 70s, and there's a lot of stuff out there. So there's 4 sports plus whatever other sports I will find. I'll just keep going and keep looking under the rug for more sets to hit, and hopefully. I won't run out of things to talk about in the future, but I get to interview people, and I've had some great guests on this show. But the 70s to me, and I try to talk to most of them about the 70s. 70s to me were, you had your essential second or second generation of true rock and roll. If you count not counting Elvis, but you count the Beatles and the Stones and all those guys, and the music of the 70s to me was the best music. Pink Floyd is the GOAT. No argument or open for debate there. But you had your Led Zeppelin, your Fleetwood Mac. Boy, you can go on and on and on, right? Boston, Electric Light Orchestra, and Peter Frampton, whatever you want to talk about. But I still think that the best thing that ever happened at Dodger Stadium in the 70s was Fleetwood Mac's Tusk video. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go hit that up. And if you haven't seen Stevie Nicks twirl a baton in a sundress, then really you haven't lived, as far as I'm concerned. But TV shows, the movies, all that stuff, people my generation grew up raised on the television. Parents were at work. You came home from school at 3:00. You put on the Flintstones reruns, Brady Bunch reruns, MASH, whatever. It was all there. So the culture played a big part of it. We saw the players change. I emphasize that a lot, from crew cuts to mustaches, sideburns, long hair, all that stuff. The uniforms changed from wools to polyester, and the carpet on the stadiums changed from grass to polyester as well. So it was really a revolutionary time in sports. Free agency awoke a long underlying condition that affected baseball for many, many years, decades, century perhaps, the ownership of ball players. So a lot of players were on the move. Television became a big part of baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. It was just a lot of stuff happening. And then at the end of the decade, obviously, we have, you know, different things happening, like the end of a Steelers thing or end of the Steelers dynasty and perhaps the Cowboys dynasty for a while. And then, the rise of the NBA with that first with that 79 Michigan State, Indiana State NCAA championship. And then those two guys sharing co-starring roles, talking about Magic and Larry Bird throughout the 80s in the NBA. So really, it was a new dawn in sports as well, and cards in particular for all of us. So anyway, that kind of is the big reason I think the 70s were an underappreciated time in our hobby, as well as in the what's called the content creators world. I don't really feel like I create content. I just kind of turn the mic on and babble. So that's not creating content, I think, or maybe it is, but that, and to me, creating content is not forcing, but, setting out with a goal to do this, that, and the other thing. And I don't have any goals when it comes to what we're doing here. So yeah, and that, I didn't know what I was doing when I started this podcast. I sure as heck don't know what I'm doing now. But I branched out into YouTube. I simulcast my podcast onto YouTube. Sometimes we have visuals on there, all that fun stuff. But I do it, and I do it because it feels good, I guess. So yeah, the past 6 months, I've really grown to appreciate, not only the cards and the physical items in our hobby, but also, again, thanks to some great content creators, I've really raised my awareness of many of the things in our hobby. I've had some guests on the show, like Dr. Jim, Rich Klein, of course, Ray from Philly, Mike Summer, who I interviewed on a whim in Vegas at the summit. That was arranged as I was taxiing into Las Vegas after landing on a whim, and we got together. I think it was 6 a.m. We got together in an empty ballroom at the, boy, what is that place called? It used to be the Elvis Hilton, but whatever, the Westgate, I guess it is, at the industry summit. So anyway, again, interviewed those guys, a couple other folks, and I hope to do more interviews with collectors. And I know there's a lot of people that do the circuit from podcast to podcast and YouTube to YouTube, but that's really not my thing because, again, I'm not a joiner. I just do what pops into my mind. I want to interview more hobbyists, and I'm not really a current event show. So if I don't interview people that are on the circuit, it's not because I don't respect them. It's just because I don't feel like I can add anything to what they've already said and done on other programs. So I'm not shunning anybody. I just I don't have anything to add there to what they're already doing. YouTube kind of podcasts were great, but YouTube is a whole other thing. There are so many good YouTube content creators out there, and I respect the ones I listen to are awesome. Okay, so John Newman's had me on his show on Sports Card Nation, and I really appreciate that. He is like the I don't know. He's like the king of content creation, right? He's got his hobby hotline twice a week now, Sports Card Nation, Hobby Quick Hits. He does another show, I think, on Sundays about football, and fun to listen to for sure. Does a great job. Bench Clear Media with Hobby Palooza, and then I tend to listen to Mike Moynihan's Golden Age of Cardboard on there because obviously that's my jam right there. Baseball Collector is also Mike's channel for his kind of his PC stuff, which is awesome. So many other so many other great channels that I've been able to pick up. Ray from Philly obviously does something at least once a week, it seems, with his pickups. Don's Field of Dreams cards, Elite Hunters, and Victor, the Rookie Card Specialist. I got to meet those two guys in Dallas this year, and perfect gentlemen, knowledgeable. I love watching their shows. I love hearing what they have to say. Their production game is way up there when it comes to content. These guys do a great job, great polished job, but they're still solid of the earth gentlemen that are collectors at heart, and I love what they do. And James from Elite Hunters was kind of the kind of kickstarted my. I was in the middle of collecting my Mickey Mantles, and he showed me his 56 in Dallas, and I was like, I have to get one of those 56 Mantles. So I'm just going to run down my list right here. Okay. So I have 1 million Cubs. We know what's going on there. All-time sports cards. Dean Gerhardt has his channel called Dean Gerhardt. Yeah, I collect it all. Great stuff on there. 3B collection with Herman. He does his thing with Kin every Monday, I believe it is. I always miss it because I'm an idiot. I have to watch it back. 4-leaf cards. I love 4-leaf and little leaf. Those back pages, of course. Stories in cardboard. I watched the Burbank Sports Card stuff. Now I had a chance to go to Burbank Sports Cards and picked up a 58 Aaron this year and a 57 Mantle, both raw. And I picked up a bunch of 72 and 70 tops cards as well. So that was fun. Getting into some other stuff like Bowman 53. That guy does Alex, I think his name is, does a wonderful job. Very soothing voice. Guy really knows how to put on a podcast, that's for sure. Diamond Yard Sports Cards is awesome. Baseball Hall of Fame. Autographs, of course. Anyway, Mike, This Baseball Card Life, I had a chance to do something with him and Ray regarding the first half of the 70s this year. And that was a fun episode to do. And Mike Summer, of course, does his thing both on Wax Pack Hero as well as on YouTube. So, Mike, I didn't mention you with the podcast part, but I enjoy your podcast and your YouTube. So, in there is also a big thank you to Bean's Ball Card Blog, which is Ken Kinsley. He's been so supportive of me, kind of nudged me over into YouTube and recommended that I throw his stuff up there because that's all or throw my stuff on there because that's all he does is listen via YouTube. He doesn't listen to podcasts. So that's one reason why I do my YouTube now as well as my podcast. And I know there's things there's etiquette you're supposed to follow when it comes to that because advertising, you're supposed to let your podcast go and play and all that stuff before you post on YouTube. I do it at the same time. I don't care. I don't have any sponsors. I always joke about sponsored by nobody. Now, I did a stint a couple of years with Neil Young, and Neil Young's big thing was he did a tour called Sponsored by Nobody, and essentially taking a stand against Pepsi and whomever else. Miller Lite was sponsoring the big rock stars of the day. So we used to have the promoters cover up any kind of advertising signs in the arenas that we would be in and stuff like that. So I joke about sponsored by nobody. I've been approached about being sponsored, and I'd love to be sponsored someday by someone, but only to the extent of it advancing my collection and not my wallet, because I this isn't why I do it. I'm not gonna make a ton of money. I'm not gonna make any money doing this because as those who create content know, you're paying for service providers and stuff like that when you do podcasts, equipment, all that jazz. So I openly mention places that I have been in hobby commerce sites or spots that I frequent, and I can do it here right now. Again, Burbank Sports Cards. I've done stuff on Huggins and Scott auction, SGC. I've done submissions to Beckett OPG. I subscribe to that. That's where I keep my database for my cards. So I'm not afraid of mentioning those names, and I certainly don't expect anything in return. I just, when I have good service, I like to shout out to them. And I don't mind, obviously, being a little controversial. I'm usually like that on other people's chat rooms during their when they're airing their shows. But yeah, I'm trying not to be controversial, right? At least not on my own show. So yeah, and speaking of that, we talk about analytics. 34 episodes into this, and I'm thankful for the people that have listened to this show. It's more than I ever would have expected, and certainly in some far-flung locations. 92%, according to my analytics, 92% of my listeners on podcasts are from the U.S., but we got people in Canada, a person or persons in Germany. France was hanging in there for a while, but we've had Mexico, Finland, Virgin Islands, South Africa rolled in recently, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Ireland, Aruba, Brazil, Japan, Australia, Netherlands. So if you're looking at my map, I've hit every continent so far other than Antarctica, and I'm sure that there were some mistakes along the way. People accidentally clicked my podcast. Maybe it's the red, white, and blue logo they liked. But if you're from one of those countries, I'd love to hear from you, like Germany or France or Canada. Be neat to hear from you. South Africa just popped in with 4 downloads this week. I don't understand what's going on over there, but boy, I'd like to hear that story as well. Over here in the United States, there's been, a lot of, I appreciate, it says Saginaw, Michigan. I don't know how accurate these are, but Saginaw, Michigan, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Smyrna, Tennessee, Buffalo, New York, Minneapolis, Littleton, Colorado, and Queen Creek, Arizona have been heavy listeners. So if you're in those areas, I appreciate it. And boy, what an honor it is to see those places pop up. I'm a geography guy. I was going to be a cartographer or design baseball stadiums when I was a kid, I suppose, but it turned out to be I got bit by the rock and roll bug and made that my living instead. So either way, I really I've traveled the world. I've been to South America and Europe and Asia. I really appreciate people from other continents as well as people from our own little isolated continent here. I really appreciate them listening. So, what are we doing in 2022? Again, more interviews, I imagine, more remote stuff. I plan on being more involved if the community will let me. I plan on being more involved with other content creators because there are some cool people out there. There are some cool collections out there. There's people that are so much more knowledgeable that I want to learn from. And I want to see other people's collections as well because I have my way of doing things. And it's like I tell people in my work life, my way may not be the best way or the only way, but it's the way that I know what the end result's going to be, which is why I do it that way. And I try to tell my kids that too. So I'm not a pro, but what I do suits me as far as how I do it. So every collection, you can't stress enough that every collection is unique and different, and it's really, really cool to see all that stuff out there. When I was growing up, and even before my hiatus, I was surprised. I had assumed everybody just collected sets and collected as many cards as they can. Now this waking up into 2020, 2021, you find that people, their PC means something different. It's dozens or hundreds of cards instead of, in my case, hundreds of thousands of cards. My goal when I was a kid was to own every baseball card, which was a lot easier in 1970 than it was, or 1975 than it was in 2021. But that's still the way I collect. I collect massive. I just love collecting, so I'll get every card I can. And I'm sitting in a room right now, my card cave in my basement, where there are probably 50,000 cards on the floor right now. I bought a recent collection that kind of covers a big gap in my collection from the late 90s to probably 2010. And 50,000 cards or so. So I'm sorting through those right now. And anyway, that's, I kind of had a as most of us do throughout our collecting, I kind of had I was kind of wrestling with what is my future in collecting as far as what do I want to do? Do I want to be strictly, pre 1990? Because over my shoulder, um, over my shoulder, over that shoulder there, that top row is wax, but the next row down is all the sets from the 90s. Okay, so all three manufacturers plus Upper Deck and Score, but complete sets from the 90s. So I was pretty much set there. 70s. I'm sorry, that's all stuff from the 80s. I apologize. And 70s, I'm pretty much set there. I'm getting closing in on finishing the top sets. I'm under 100 cards, I think, for the 70s. So do I just stop there and keep going backwards? But I wrestled with it, and I keep going. Decided, you know what, I'm still going to get as many cards as I can, and I'll sell what I can on eBay. I don't know about trading, 80s, 90s cards. I don't know. I don't know if there's a market for that, or if the energy is worth it. But just going to keep on trying to collect everything I can. So it's also educating me on the business of side of things, right? Like it was so simple in the 70s with Tops, and then you had your Kellogg's and Hostess stuff, but um, Tops, and then the 80s, Fleer and Donruss came on board, and towards the end of the decade, Score and Upper Deck, but then it just became a free for all in the 90s. And for any of you that are fretting what is going to happen in the next couple of years with Fanatics and Tops, my mantra or my mantra is always every card I want has already been made, so I'm not that worried about the future. But keep in mind that Tops. I'm of the opinion, and the strong opinion, that Tops is not going away, because look what happened in the 90s. Try to follow the Donruss family tree when you get a chance. It goes in every direction. It goes back to the 70s as far as baseball cards with, they're the ones that, one of the splinters of the Donruss family tree was the folks that printed up the Kellogg's cards. Sports Flicks was involved. Pinnacle was involved. Score was involved. Then Playoff became involved in the early 2000s. So that family tree is massive and spreads in all directions. And obviously, Panini kind of has it all now with them. So anything's possible. Pinnacle still lives on, Score still lives on, Donruss still lives on, all that stuff. So Tops will outlast them all. Trust me. What form that is, we don't know, but it's going to be fun finding out for sure. So yeah, that's my turn back the clock on 2021. And further, we went back, and I apologize for the long rants about my kind of my sordid history there. But I again, I tend to do a stream of conscience type thing. So when I go, I go. So anyway, thank you for joining me this week in my journey back in time. No dad facts for you. I apologize. Again, my podcast is meant to educate mostly myself. If I can get some other stuff in there and somebody learns something, then that's great. But the dad facts thing is, we come from the 70s. So encyclopedias are where we used to have to get all our knowledge. So it's good to have that knowledge at our fingertips now. Dad facts, I love them. Book of lists, I love them. So you'll see many more shows with lists of things. You'll see more stadium shows, and we'll venture out into arenas and all that stuff. So the journey back in time is not finished. We still have a lot of sets. We still have a lot of arenas. We still have a lot of really cool topics to talk about. So keep going there as long as I can go with there. If you have any comments or suggestions, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. That 70s Card Show at gmail.com, on Twitter at 70s Card. Leave comments, criticisms, all that stuff. I don't know how you share stuff or smash thumbs up buttons or like buttons, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I just would rather hear from people and hear about what they do and how they do it more than anything. So my self-worth isn't predicated on the amount of listeners, but if we can get some quality listeners and viewers that can share their experiences and want to come on the show and talk about them, then I'd love to chat, because that's what it's all about, right? That's what collecting is all about. Meeting people, whether it's at a show, face to face, negotiating with a dealer, or whatnot, or back in the day when I was 8 years old, trading my Mike Schmidts for my Carl Yastrzemskis, whatever. But it's all about, as our friend John Newman says, the hobby is the people. It's all about people, and none of these companies are going to be able to negate that. We thrive on the secondary market, and part of the secondary market is a big part of it is the people. So reach out to me if you want to chat. If you want to come on the show, that'd be great. I will continue to try to reach out to people that I would like to talk to, and find out more about how they collect, what they collect, where they collect, when they collect, and all that stuff. Hopefully none of that stuff is too boring for us all. The music, intro and outro music on the podcast, is provided by a band called Mango Safari, which is my nephew Ryan Keating, Penn State senior. He apparently does not have the band anymore, but him and his boy Grant, they make that music. They continue to make music, and Ryan, when he graduates from college this spring, will attempt his stab at pursuing his dream of becoming a professional musician of some sort, whether it's a band, a writer, a producer, whatever. So I wish him luck, and I thank him for letting me use that music. And as somebody that appreciates music, I really appreciate the music that he's made with his partner Grant. So that's about that. We're clocked in at 42 minutes here and rising, which is probably on the shorter end of the stuff I like to do. But since I really didn't have anything to talk about but myself, we shouldn't prolong this any longer. So anyway, as always, um, happy New Year to everybody. 2021 in the books, 2022 coming up around the corner tomorrow. Wish everybody luck. Our hobby is going to be awesome in 2022. Enjoy collecting, and more importantly, enjoy your collection. Everybody be safe this weekend, and we will see you next year. Gracias.